prepared for what's happening, and fortunately the people in this country are stirring, and this election is changing a tone. It's the first time in a 100-year history of the Federal Reserve that the Federal Reserve has become an issue in this campaign. If we reject the notion of the failed policy of the entitlement welfare state, which we're in the midst and people are realizing it's failing, even those on the receiving end are getting pretty worried too because they know this can't continue. But we also have to ask our question about the foreign policy. The Constitution is rather clear. The President is the Commander-in-Chief, and we should have a strong national defense. We should defend our country. We should have, protection of national security, and that is a precise function that we should have. But that is one area where we don't have to worry very much right now because we have the strongest military in the history of the world. There's no power in the world. Even if they all got together, we are so powerful because we have more weaponry than everybody else put together. So we are not going to be attacked. Nobody's on the verge of invading us. And yet, what are we doing? We have distorted things by distorting our defense, because not only do we allow our presidents to go to war, we're allowing our presidents to go to war under NATO and UN resolutions. That's wrong. But what we have to do is decide that how much engagement we should have around the world. I think we should have plenty. It should be engagement with trade and friendship and travel and expressing of ideas. I always find it interesting that those who will challenge our views on non-intervention in foreign policy will say, oh, you guys are a bunch of isolationists. Actually, it's the opposite of isolation. We don't want to build fences and borders and tariffs and all this. They usually are the ones who want to put on the sanctions and the tariffs, and then they call us the isolationists. Matter of fact, I don't know if you've listened to the debates, I've been very explicit about who the real isolationists are. It's the ones who are resisting our efforts to open up diplomatic relationships and trade with Cuba. That's what we need to be doing. But today it's a financial matter as much as a defense matter because we can't afford it. We will come home. There is no doubt in my mind we will come home. Just think, just a few decades ago, the Soviets had their empire. They had 30,000 nuclear weapons and missiles in Cuba and all these things. But they finally overextended themselves. They had a big empire. They had Eastern Europe, and they had a massive amount of people under the dictatorship of the communists. But what did they do? They figured, well, we need one more country, and we're going to do it. So they had this foolish notion that they could go to the graveyard of empires and invade Afghanistan, and look at what happened to them. You know, I wonder about whether that could happen to us if we don't wise up real soon and come home from Afghanistan. The debt in the last 10 years fighting these undeclared, unwinnable wars that we don't know when they will end. We're not even sure we're fighting. And our national debt went up $4 trillion because of these wars. Just think if those $4 trillion that had not been spent overseas bombing and killing people, what if all that money had been spent back here at home? Maybe the middle class would still be a lot wealthier than it is today. So the foreign policy of non-intervention, strong national defense is something that we have to return to, because we will have to give up on it just as the Soviets did, because this cannot be maintained. But we have to make certain that we understand some of the other complications of a government that we depend on, whether it's economic entitlement system from cradle to grave, or the fact that we think that we are the great nation and we can tell other nations how to live. But also, these conditions are not conducive for the very job that the government should be engaged in, and that is protecting your liberty. That's what they should be concerned about. military people, as well as our officials in government, take the oath of office to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And like I said, the foreign enemies are not capable of coming and taking us. Our military can protect us. But unfortunately, I see a serious threat to our liberties by internal threats, by our own government overstepping their bounds and encroaching on our lives and our liberties. Right after 9/11, of course, we had the Patriot Act. If it had been called Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, maybe we would have never had the Patriot Act. Of course, if we're serious about protecting your privacy, we should indeed, as soon as possible, repeal the Patriot Act. And along with that would be the invasion of our privacy and the activities that we have to put up with at the airport. We don't really need the TSA to make us safe. But we have to admit the truth that we're in trouble if we're going to correct these problems, that this is what's happening. There is more admission of truth, more excitement than there has been in a long, long time in this country. That we have now generated interest in certain groups of people, but right now the groups are blending together because the numbers are growing so rapidly. I've given a lot of credit to the young people, the people on our college campuses, because they have been responding to this issue of individual liberty, about the problems with the Federal Reserve, about a foreign policy that gives us a perpetual war. And these ideas are alive and well and exciting on the college campuses. And I love that. Also, the group of individuals who were sort of left out in limbo for a long time, and many that I knew about and never knew exactly where they were or what they were doing, but the people who knew what was right, but they felt disenfranchised. They weren't involved in politics, and now they're getting interest back again. There is a remnant of people always in society that will always cling to the truth of things and be available when that time comes. And I think that time is coming right now. I think it has been said that if an idea whose time has come, armies and governments can't stop those ideas. And I think that's where we are today. But we must realize how serious it is, because under these circumstances, whether it's the Patriot Act or whether it's the announcement by our president, 1 year ago approximately, when he just out of the clear blue said it is a proper policy now of the United States government that if they deem it necessary, they can assassinate American citizens. And they said, well, of course, only bad people, But the whole thing is, no charges made, no arrests made, no trials made, and somebody is going to be the judge, jury, and executioner because they can assassinate American citizens. I mean, this is very dangerous. Just think of the very bad people that always have gotten trials. Timothy McVeigh got a trial. I mean, they didn't say, oh, well, we know he did it, and he's a bad guy, go out and assassinate him. But we don't need that. We don't need that, even a subtle threat that this might happen. What about after World War II? The Nazi war criminals, they were tried. They weren't just shot and assassinated. Adolf Eichmann, one of the worst war criminals, was caught many years after World War II. He was taken to Israel, and Israel tried him, and executed him. But it's the principle of the thing that you can't have a few people assuming and making the assumption that we're guilty. And one thing that they have done just recently in the National Defense Authorization Act is a very bad move as well. This says that the military now can arrest American citizens and held without an attorney, without charges, without a trial, indefinitely in a secret prison, and you don't know where they are. I mean, we can't allow that to stand. That has to be reversed. Everything is based on the fact that every one of us is a suspect now. Like at the airport, everybody's a suspect. You don't have to have reason to search people and strip search people and all that they do. But they changed the words about who should be retained and checked out and who is a suspect who now could be a criminal. They said anybody who is an associated force, associated forces. And that nobody has the exact definition, but it probably means that if you have visited a certain website, if you've donated money to a certain group of people, if you've used email in a certain way, if you've attended a meeting that is anti-war, who knows what they might say, that you are an associated force and therefore the government has the right to send the military to arrest an individual like that. That is just something that the founders would be astounded that we have allowed ourselves to go to this extent when they made this effort to give us the Bill of Rights. And of course, that to me is a great, great threat. But I'm also believing that the people are realizing what's happening, whether it's the monetary issue, the foreign policy. People are coming alive with the ideas and they want this stuff reversed.